Are you looking to make great parametric models and test your 3D imagination? If so, then Grasshopper is the program for you. Hi, I'm Brendan, your instructor to this Introduction to Grasshopper course, where I give you insight into how Grasshopper works with a few great exercises to test your new skills. This introductory course to Grasshopper gives you a one-on-one introduction to the Grasshopper interface, the major and minor commands and tabs, and hands-on exercises using the functions comprehensively with explanations that you can follow. And also so that you'll have more than one way to apply Grasshopper programs to your parametric projects. We will create geometry, explore math and geometrical functions, while simplifying complex scripts with workflow tips so your projects will run smoother from start to finish. I'm a licensed architect and I've been making parametric architecture since being part of the design research lab with Zadid and Patrick Shoemaker. At the end of this course, you'll be able to put parametric design and Grasshopper into your workflow and understand how to make that an even better imaginative design with your work. So if you're ready to get started making great parametric architecture and work with Grasshopper 3D, then let's go. Grasshopper is a great program. And before we get started with this course, I'm just showing you some of the things that we're working on. And also some of the concepts behind Grasshopper. Essentially, Grasshopper is a plugin for Rhino. It's parametric. It essentially allows you to use some of the functionality of Rhino and some of the functionality of the program itself, with also having several plugins. In this Rhino 7, which I'm using, Grasshopper is inbuilt in. I believe it's inbuilt in Rhino 6. Essentially, you can get your 3D modeling done at the same time you're using a parametric modeling if you want to do something like a unique surface or a certain type of geometry calculations. You could do that straight into Grasshopper. And the way that you're going to do that, of course, is accessing it via just typing in Grasshopper. It's also, of course, one of the plugins that you can always just click on to get to. And the way that you get to Grasshopper is simply by clicking in your standard menu, the Grasshopper command. You get a drop down where you can also just do a Grasshopper player. Also, you can see the plugins or just run a script. So you just click the basic for Grasshopper. And this is where we start with all the magic. Before moving ahead in this course, there's some little rendering in Rhino here. If you're new to Rhino, this is something that's really important to using Grasshopper. You probably want to get your copy of Rhino along with this. If you don't have Rhino 7, which comes with Grasshopper, you'll have to be including Grasshopper separately. But your knowledge of Rhino should really increase with your knowledge of Grasshopper because it's pretty much using the same functionality. I have a course on Rhino, and there's more to come, so go ahead and check out that and my other links if you need help with your Rhino modeling, because that's definitely going to bring your Grasshopper modeling to another level. One important thing to always have when working with any program is to have a good set of concepts that will lead you as you work on the program. And so I've made 5 key concepts that are going to help you in any of your Grasshopper projects. The first of which is input and output. This is an important concept because everything in Grasshopper is going to have an input, that's data that goes in, and an output data that's going to come out. And the more that you focus on getting these right before time, the better whatever happens in between, whether it's a big program or whether it's a code, it's going to work out. So just have that in mind. Get a clear idea of your input and output, and your scripting will be more valuable and more effective. The next one is you want to focus and isolate solutions as well as problems. What that means is if there's a part of your code that's not working right, just separate it out with some maybe test variables to see what it's doing. That's going to really help save time because you can't really deal with a big program over time. Even though Grasshopper is more visual editing, it still operates by the same principles. If there's something small that's wrong, it can mess up the whole thing. So focus and isolate to get the right solutions. The next is research times 10. And what that means is there's lots of great content besides the help menu. There are communities for Grasshopper scripting and learning that can help you in your work. And I say, why not find those guys and learn from them? So that's going to be a major part of your work. Learning from this course is one source. Some of my resources is great, but also you can just go to several different sites and find that. And that's something that will always help you. Number 4 is you want to save your work pretty regularly. That's both in the model and in your code. This is essentially meaning that you don't know if your computer could crash, or this is also in terms of saving iterations. For instance, if you change something major, save it as a version. Make a key version and then save your things that you might discard in the future in another folder, so you can always trace your work and find out what was done. And finally, you definitely want to maintain readability. No matter how big your canvas gets and how many things are going on, if you focus on readability, dividing things into sections, using colors, using groups, knowing which inputs are for which, and just keeping those really clear, including naming the files, that's going to help you come back and get progress if you're working on something, if you're working with a team. So these are the type of things that will help you get further, definitely show that professionalism, and just be more effective when you're using Grasshopper. The first thing about Grasshopper is its interface. And what you're going to notice is it's just sort of like a window in a window. You can have your model in the background. You can be working on your Grasshopper. And we're going to go into the interface with a blank model. So you see like what everything does. Now I've fully rescaled the Grasshopper interface, and I'm seeing that pretty much it's taking from the entire set of the window, although I could close down, you can see Rhino's in the background. And I could just click this box to get it large again. So you see it's a pretty simple system and setup. You have your typical file menu, where you have your ability to open and close files, to edit different geometry or information inside. You can change different things about the view, decide what you're going to be displaying. You also can work on how the program is computing in terms of all these code that's going on, and you also have a help menu. So that's obviously basic. And then in your tabs, you now see the different type of data sets, functionality that is going to be available in Grasshopper. These params are typically different types of geometry, points, curves, lines, numbers, text, etc. Also different ways of input. Just input within the canvas, which you see in this here. And then you have different things like different math functions, different ways of working with sets, creating and working with vectors, working with different curves. This is for the same for all these different types of objects. You can work on analysis, division, primitives, splines, utilities. You'll see the same thing happening with surfaces and meshes. Then you have Intersect, which is, of course, dealing with like a complex geometry in Rhino. And then Transform, which is also really great for how you're building out with different multiple forms and different ways of transforming it. And then you have your display functions here. And at the end, you have some plugins that some of them have been actually grafted into the main Grasshopper interface. So Kangaroo has been very useful. Launchbox is something I added to this software set, and you see some great things about that as well. Those are your tabs. Here are below all your tabs, your basic canvas and interface. At the top, we're going to see, of course, ability to save, to work on our zoom for the model. We can very easily open a new file here as well. So it's just a little mini command bar. You can save your views, which is great because if you're working on one part, starting here, and you change the other part, you could be saving that. And then you can also sketch within your project. So that's also very useful if you're highlighting something. You can go over to the right hand side where it sees options about choice about drawing and different ways of working with wireframe or shaded. You can also, of course, do some other things with boundaries and different qualities. So this is just work with view. Depends on what model you're working with. In the lower left-hand side, you can see some of your common commands that you just will click here. Anything you click here, you just place on the canvas. So you might use some things that you're either common with. And then on the right hand side, it shows you where you are in your overall model. So if you're really deep in it, you get like a little bit of context, and your compass can help you find the way home. And so that's very useful. And now for interacting, below it's looking at your autosave information and also different information about your computing the solution. So that's the basic interface. Now we're going to go into how to actually start to interact with your canvas. To start off, we're just going to be looking at some simple ways of operating with the canvas before really putting any big code into play. The first thing you want to look at is definitely, besides navigating, which I'm actually doing by my right mouse button, and just also using my scroller to zoom. You can click on any object in the canvas with a left mouse button, and I can drag it. I can right selection window to select it. You do the same for left, and if it's partial for the left or going right, it has to be whole if you're going right. It has to be partial if you're going left. So that's the common thing. If you right click over any object, you will get like the name of the object, and you have some options here: preview, enable, or bake. Preview is how it's going to look in the Rhino interface. We'll look at that in a moment. Enable, it says if it's running or not. Bake lets you export it into your model as geometry. And you also get a chance to look at any runtime warnings. That's debugging code. And you also get to choose how is the wire going to be displayed. And we'll look at that when we start to put commands together. Then you have down here different ways that data can be dealt with in list. It could be flattened or grafted or simplified, and we'll look at the value of those. Then you have the option here to this right here is the input object. You can set it to one input or multiple inputs, and you also manage the things that are in it. You can also, when you have the object in there, you can internalize it or extract it, which is great because that means you can make a model and then put it all into Grasshopper. And Grasshopper has it. You don't have to open the file. And that's definitely one critical thing we'll talk about. When you click on the canvas, the blank canvas area, you have another set of options. You right click, you have the ability to lock the solver. So that means pretty much anything that's running will stop. By default, the program is continuously running, and so that means that any of the commands is going to be continuously running. But if you lock it, it sort of keeps it at one particular data set. And you'll see that's important with certain functions that are sort of moving over time. As you right click, you also get the choice to choose about preview. So this is obviously when you're actually selecting multiple objects. You can select the multiple objects to turn the preview on or off. You can enable it or disable it. You can bake multiple objects. You can also just work on zooming. You can group things, you can cluster them, and you also can, of course, go to different things like your preferences or navigation, and you can find anything in the model. When you double click over the canvas, it gives you a search keyword box. You actually can just put in any of the commands that you want. So if you didn't know how to find line, which is a parameter, in my geometry here, you would just pretty much go to double click and you could find most things that you're looking for. So, and like I said again, like when you select multiple things, you get the choice of grouping. You can select all the things that you've grouped. You can ungroup. You can choose a color for the group. You can choose to have a different sort of outline. And by having a group, there's this ease of working in. And you still right click if you select that group. You can just disable the entire group, or you can enable them. And so you now see some of these are active. You can recompute here. And that's just a very useful way of working with the canvas. And of course, the ability to just maybe if you're really close in zoom, you just said you want to create a zoom. That's great. You can always go to the wide canvas, and then you can go to that previous zoom that you created. You can always just take out anyone that you don't want to use. And that's just a great way of just helping you manage your project. We're going to go through the tabs, and you're going to learn about each of these particular sets of tabs. And then we're going to go into a great exercise. Of course, this one's going to be really dependent on seeing what's happening in the Rhino program itself. We're actually just going to click on the perspective view. We're going to look at the params. And you can see the sort of params that are basic geometries in Rhino, points, curves, all sorts. If you don't know the type, you can always just test it out. For instance, this actually, if you're trying to say, oh, it's a curve, let me set one curve, go in here. And obviously some of the commands are actually not what you think, because obviously sometimes like the one for rectangle is actually asking you to create a rectangle, whereas the one that was creating the curve, you actually don't have to create a curve. You could just select the curve. It's very simple there. And the same thing happens if you're trying to get a point in. You can click that point. Actually, when you click object here, you can right click and set one point. That was already selected. So that's what you're now seeing is the object. We're clicking on it. You'll see it in green. If you're not clicking on it, it will show it in red. Now that is an option. You could always turn that off for certain objects. And it's the option. You also don't draw any preview geometry. So preview geometry is an option. It does slow down computer speed when you're doing a lot of objects. I do like to see it so I can just orient my work. Essentially, that's the workflow. You'll be getting your inputs, if you want, from your model here. If you do a surface, you can just come in here and you double click. That's the efficient way. And you just put surface. And you select one surface. One thing I've done here is I've created several different types of surfaces, or multiple surfaces, a sub D, a mesh, and a poly surface. And in the program, you're actually going to be choosing mesh for meshes. BRep is the poly surface or solid right here. And sub D is going to be the selection of the sub D surface. And in geometry, you also have the option to create groups. And groups actually are just really, some of these lower objects are just where you can select in the item in here. And you actually, if you press shift when you're clicking it, you can already just set those things to be made together, and you could transform or do any sort of object editing here. You also can click on just geometry raw. Geometry raw will select any geometry within the model. So that's a catch-all for items in the model. So those are the different types of geometries that you'd be working with. Next on this Param tab is your primitives, where you're looking at things like your Boolean yes, no's, integer, which is a number, and they're each looking a little bit different depending on what is their input. So like they have the same name, but if you right click, you'll see again the name for that, the standard command issues. You also look in Boolean, you see you can set it to true or false. For color, selecting color is going to be set, by different values in that way. Integer is just going to be a number. You can also have multiple numbers. You can just say I'm going to put this as 23. So now when you put your mouse over it, you see the little tooltip that says 23. And you can see the similar sort of item for each of these. Color will be actually showing a number. And our primitives are when we are looking at putting in more numerical value. And so that's how they're going to look. You also can include things like data paths and file paths. So you can just use a text file to control some of the things within your geometry, including time. So it's great to see that you can really start to put in appropriate time. And one way to quickly always check about an object is, if you actually select one geometry, you actually use the Input tab. Most important thing, I believe, is the panel, because you can actually plug it in. This is what we've been doing. We've been plugging in a single point of data, and it will tell you the type of object that's being selected. So I can select a different geometry type. I could select sub D, and it will tell me exactly what's being referenced. Or if it's a group, it'll tell you the group. And this also can be used after commands to find out what type of data and the numbers, including that are exported. Other input are things like the number slider, where you can slide any manner of numbers. You can do integers, odd numbers, even numbers. You can also have a Boolean toggle. Double click, get those done. Have a control knob where you can change the value in that way. You can work on multi-dimensional sliders where you're multi-dimensionally moving. And these all input are going to export numerical pieces of information. And I can just create another panel. And you'll see the type of data that's coming out, or the numerical slider, or Boolean. And then you also, of course, have different things like a digit scroller. So that's another way of looking at data. Depends on what you need. You can create a value list. You can also create a calendar, a clock, and so on and so forth, including importing different types of geometry files directly in. And you also can, of course, just always connect to things that's in the model. So input is very complicated. If you're not knowing what you want to do, that's why I say to figure out your input first, and we'll look at that later in our examples. In the utilities, we're going to be seeing different things like working from different ways of how you're going to move data, I guess, and work with your programming script. For instance, if there's a trigger, something that happens, something else will happen, or we can pick particular data. You can work on input. You also have some context bake and a couple different other items. I've never really used this on an average, but sometimes it's actually quite useful. And of course, you have your option to data record. So you can data record over time. So what you're doing in the canvas can export. So that's your Params tab. On the Math tab, we have several different ways of looking at things for math. We have, of course, the basic operators. If you're doing your multiplication, addition, powers. We also have some Boolean where we're saying it's something equal than or more than, factorial, modulus. All these are going to be here, and you'll for each one see the type of input, and it will tell you instructions on how to use it, or if it's not really working. You get instructions by clicking on help, and it'll tell you about the commands. And the matrix is where you're dealing with a larger set of data. Of course, the matrix is having multi-dimension, one an X, one and Y. Domain, this is very important when you're dealing with ranges. For instance, we're looking at parameters in a curve. Knowing the bounds is really important. So you can find out the bounds. You can create the bounds or domains. And so that's very useful in those operations. And you also can divide a domain, and you can also start to deal with that. Now, on the other side of these, you might want to be working with sets, because the idea is you want to work with the domain. You can deal with different elements in it with sets. Also, you can work with polynomials. For instance, if you're trying to get a cube or something, or a little more important set of things. If you're looking to put an equation, you always can very simple by actually putting in a expression. So expression is where you're going to get the equation, ability to do that. So, and yeah, if you're looking for something, again, search it in your keyword, but also, maybe look to see maybe it's on a similar tab. You can also put in your VB script. So that's something I like to do, and I'll show you a little bit about that, because that's a way of doing some things that are in the program, but you're going to be using the coding language for Rhino. And then you also can put your time in, you can construct the time, or you can combine it. So that's useful for different type of functions. For instance, if we're also working with the scripts, like anything you're trying to put in your, I think just open up something and see what elements are needed to go in. For this variable, this is a little bit different. If you click on the expression, you can choose if you're going to format. You can also say x times 2 plus y times 2. And you just have to put in your x and y, and you get the result. For instance, here where I've made this x, both of them are 1. I just copied that. I just click to press Control Copy, and just put one value here, one value here, and I created a panel. And now we have a little bit of an issue, and it's telling me that it has an invalid name. So that's sometimes the issue of something that's placed in with the program's name. So you have to change the name. It's a variable name. It's going to be inside of the command, including if you're using a VB script. You really need to be watching those names. And I just create a panel to find out the result. And that's going to be 4. So that's 2 times 2. And we could, of course, just replace that with the number slider. And we click on that and pull that over the left mouse button. And we can see that changing in real time. And so trigonometry functions are another set of functions. So if you're needing the sine, the cosine, you have it right here. You also can find things like the circumcenter, triangle. Trigonometry also can be converted between degrees and radians. And of course, as always, there's a lot of different util commands. This helps you deal with, again, some functions with this type of data in math. So you can go well with a lot of math functions within Grasshopper. The sets bar is another set of information that you can use. It's divided into lists, into sequences, into sets, into text, and trees. So trees are going to be the most complicated thing that we're not really going to go too much into. There's a lot of good resource on it. We're actually going to use some of the commands here. Essentially, this is when a command outputs one or multiple pieces of data, it might operate in separate arrays. So things like that are going to be useful when you're working with really complex data. But the simplest, of course, is just working with simple list. For instance, if you're creating a list, you actually can do that with sequence. For instance, if I just said I want to have a series, you look at the series, I can actually go to a particular count, and this actually has a step already of 1. So this is going to 10. So if I go to my panel, I'll just drag this over here, and you can see that it's a list going to 9. So that's 10 numbers. I can now go into my list command, and I say if I want to go into this list and I just want to get the first item, it will be 0. But if I put my range or my slider, my number slider in here, and I turn it to integer at 0 to 10, that's going to be giving me, and I will actually just plug this panel in instead of that one. It'll give me that index at that item. And you have several different functions like that. You can actually remove an item from the list. You can find the length of the list. You can place particular items. You can split a list. It gets very creative. You also can weave items that are not in the list, and you put them together using the weave tool. These are, of course, all best learned with some of the applications we're going to show later. With sequence, you can do more than just number sequences. You can also do Fibonacci. You can just choose where is it going to go to. You can choose, of course, you can duplicate a piece of data and just have it multiple times, and that's an interesting way of just make a big array. And you can call like the first or second, or choose different ways of organizing, and that's for working with bigger data. The next thing you could be working on is working with sets, where you can create a set of numbers. This definitely is more mathematical. So if you're more experienced with math, this would be something you might be into. Finally, on this tab, we're looking at ability to create characters and also work with characters. So, as opposed to saying like a character specific one, the idea is that we're taking out particular characters of a text. We can actually process text using this sort of thing. And this actually could be a great way to read a file that you're using. And you can also just export things out onto 3D space as well from here. And if you're looking to go into these commands, just want to play around with it, just do the basic item of just look at the type of data, look at the function, go to the help, because there's way too many commands for what you can really learn, even in a few hours. But we're going to go through a great example of just scoring through these commands. Now we're going to look at the vector bar, because it's going to be simple for looking at things like vectors or curves, surfaces, mesh. These are all going to be pretty much, you're going to be constructing things, or you're going to be analyzing things. So different things like planes are really useful when you're doing a transform. Essentially, like your basic plane is going to be used for quite a lot of things. You can also deconstruct planes. You can flip them. Essentially, you can create them from any geometry. So this is a very much where you're going to just use your geometry to work on planes. It's not that complicated. When you're working with grids, you have the ability to make different types of grids. You can populate geometry. You can say, if we have a 3D shape or something, I could just go in here and say BRep for my poly surface, set 1 BRep, and I actually can just go and say populate 3D, and you'll just be within that realm. And that's a great way of just getting your information right there. You can do that on a 2D surface as well. And making your grids is also just a really interesting way of working with the file. If I go into new file, and we're not going to save this previous one, we just want a large object. You see that we have sort of just these basic little grids that we create, and there's all sorts of parameters for how large it is, which is the plane, which is pretty much the starting point. And you can make radial grids. You can make these in rectangular or square, and give you all sorts of commands to work on these. And the filled command is something I don't typically use, but essentially, again, it's really helping you to work on various geometry within the vector world. Working with your points, that's the most simple, obviously. You have the ability to construct points. You have the ability to both deconstruct points. That's the most common one. For instance, if you have your 0, 0, 0, you can always just change here. You can set a point to 0. You can add points with your math command, but you can work with points that are in your model here. And you of course can go through finding things like the distance. And in the other tabs, now let's just cover vector first. Vector has very similar items to the point area, where you can construct, deconstruct. You also can find the unit vector that will scale it to 1. and you find things like the direction. So this helps you like, rotating things. Very useful. You go to your curve command, a tab. One great thing here is that you also have these sets where your vectors will come from your curve closest point. So that's helping you to get closest point. There's one of those in our surface command tab as well, where you have the closest point in BRep. That's a very useful way of working with geometry, and that's part of the analysis tools. In addition to the constructing the primitives, where you can be creating all sorts of types of lines or splines. You also can be analyzing them, exploding them, joining them, projecting them, fillet, offset. So essentially, most things you can do in Rhino, you can be able to do here. The key things that people are often using are the analysis and division tools, because you can divide curves and get information. And we'll go into that. And the same thing happens. You also get length, these sort of information. The same thing happens in your surface command, where you can look at things like volume, area, and you can be getting things like the BRep edges. You can work on get the wireframe. Bounding box is also another command that's very useful. For if you just put a bounding box, you can have a 3D geometry within your model, and it immediately starts to give you valuable information that you can now, interpret. So my little box here, I could just come here and turn that into my BRep. Set that one BRep. And this will give me that bounding box. And if I want the box edges, box corners is actually the way it's listed. You'll get it right here. So, this happens no matter what type of object you're making. For instance, if I went here, my solid, and I was making a sphere, just a very simple sphere, and I changed that BRep to be this one, it's giving me my edges. So there's a lot of really complex tools here, and similar for analysis for the mesh. It just deals with a different type of geometry because it's not so much surfaces, so it definitely knows those mesh edges, face normals. So this is a great way if you're working in meshes that you're creating, your primitives, again, where you're getting to create it from scratch. You also can do a lot of great triangulations. These are some similar commands from Weaver Bird. That was a plugin that was before. And the utilities that you're going to go through on all of these, they're going to do similar things of ways of working with the vertices, the different elements within the geometry. The utilities could be joining the BReps, dealing with holes, offsetting the surface. So those are all going to be similar. So depending on the type of geometry, you'll find out what you're going to be working with. These tabs, they have a lot of things that are going to be relating to each other. This is a really important tab, the Intersect and Transform tab. I put these together because they're doing like similar things. Because it's more of a mathematical way of working with things. You're going to be editing things that are physical, and you have the ability to solve the information that's going on. For instance, these two lines, if I have two BReps that intersect, it's simple, obviously, if you're just doing it in model, but if you're making a very big set of geometry, the fact that Grasshopper could be solving multiple of these operating at the same time is really powerful. So, if we have two BReps intersecting, then we will go ahead and just physical intersection of two BReps versus like a line that would intersect it. And it will tell us all the ways that it intersects. And so, if you're trying to do that with a plane, this exports, and all I need to do is right click on these and click on preview off, and you'll see all the lines that are actually intersecting. So that's a great way of finding that out. But if you're looking at something like a plane that was intersecting with those, you can just, of course, create a plane And if I just created a plane in the model, surface to surface, and I can just come up. And the great thing about it is also it could be selecting set one plane. And sometimes it, again, some things you can create, some things it'll try to create from the model. So I get to choose here a little bit of things from my plane. So that helped me at least determine that one. So now I can use my BRep plane intersection. So if I was using one of these and one of these, they can tell me where it intersects with the plane. So that could be very useful. I'm trying to get section information. And it gives me curves and points. And the same thing happens as we're looking with regions, where you can split items, you can trim them. These are, of course, standard things in Rhino. And you could also do things with particular shapes. So that's more of a 2D sometimes. And you can be having regions for those together. Now, transform is not too far from, again, that intersection. It's one is sort of a little more analysis, but transforming, for instance, if you wanted to rotate your object, we would just maybe choose one of these, and we already have this in the model. Turn the preview back on. We can choose an angle here, and I can just very simply come to my params input and just use a little control knob, and you can see that I could be changing this. Now this is rotating on the axis, so as you can see where it's rotating, it's just revolving there. So we have the ability, of course, to rotate in several different other types of ways in our transform. So you'll look, and this is just a basic Euclidean, where we can rotate 3D, rotate direction. You can also array things, so that's also very useful. Of course, this is more like linear versus, copy to a point. Like if I wanted to copy things, if I have a line, I would want to go and divide my line. And I would come back here, curve. Then I'm going to select that one curve I just made. And so if I take that curve now and I say, now I want to make a circle, and I want this circle to be multiple places. On here, maybe I would just do move, and so that's a very simple transform command you get from this simple Euclidean menu. And that's one way that I would typically be moving things. And what you do is you're not going to move from here. You'd be actually trying to get things like the center point, for instance, like the center point of this curve. Now it's a curve, so you really can't get the center point of a curve in the same way. For this one you can. If it was a spline, it would be different. For now the curved circle, it's screwing up. So the way you would get the center point of the curve right here is you really would be looking at the sort of a curve middle, and that actually gives us that point. So you can see some of the issues that happen when you're working with these. But now, actually, if you break down the circle into this bounding box or this control polygon, you now can do your center of the polygon. And so these are some of the types of things that you'll be working with. But essentially, if I was moving these this curve, and I want to move it from this center point to the line division point, I would just do a subtraction. And this always is a little bit tricky. So I'm going to take the point and subtract. And this is going to actually be a vector. And if I did this, you can see that I have copied this command into these different areas. So you see how that works, where you're going to be pushing essentially your value here. And the great thing about it in Grasshopper is that if I work with my curves, I can just move it, and it's actually going to be moving parametrically. And I can actually even rebuild it. And I could say, what if I have like 10 counts? And then it could start being, a curve instead of just a regular line. And so your transform is, responding to all that. And so that's a little bit of a combination working with that transform, because again, I could have come back and done that in this way, where I could take my base curve, or this is my circle. I could take my that path curve, and I could, of course, because these are not being used currently, just click over here and just disable. But because I've done it here, you can see that the way it's done is not the way I want it, because it's not directly on it. But if I move maybe the center to here, you'd see it doing a bit of a similar thing. So there are multiple ways to do things. You can find different ways. But it's always good to know those ways in case one might have a bit of an issue. And you could always come in here and change the geometry while you're working on it. Undo that. Afline gives you some abilities for scaling, shearing a little more, affecting the physical transformation of the geometry. Morphing does sort of similar, where you can do things like mirror, do things like stretch, taper, twisting. So that's great in a program like Grasshopper, because it will affect the Grasshopper data instead of the original geometry. So you won't be losing geometry. In your utilities, you have the ability to split, compound, do things like group, ungroup, and so forth. So these are the useful or transform controls. And the command that's the sort of last that I'll really go through, because Kangaroo and Lunchbox are definitely going into a lot more complex, which you can get into and check my courses for if I've gone into this yet. Lunchbox will be actually part of one of the examples here. Display, it gives you the ability to show things in colors, to put dimensions on things in your model, also to create things like graphs and previews, or just working with vectors. And it's great because it helps you just organize things. And one thing I'm going to do really quickly is set up a list of points so you can see how these work in action. And I'm going to click and create a points. Now, I can create a point list about these points, but the first thing I have to do is create the point itself. I'm going to select these multiple points. This point list command is here, you can see. And now have these points, and they're sort of in order. I actually can be labeling each of these points. And what we've done here is I've actually created a listing for my points that I just created. All I needed to do to add tags to them was simply create my text tag, which you can find here. You just go ahead and click on the text tag. You also do a text tag 3D, and you just come over the command, and you can choose the size of the text. It can be very wee or large. It helps you figure out what's going on, and you could click on the point order, and this will help you figure that out. And that's useful definitely for finding out if the orders of your little points from your model are coming out in the right way. The preview also is really useful because it helps you choose different, you can choose the material, You can have custom preview. And so obviously what you're doing in Grasshopper is a preview for what the model will look like. So it's always useful to have that. Graphs, you get a couple different options. You can make a bar graph. You know, like if I put in my points, you know, I wouldn't really want to put in the points, but you know, it still gives me information. So depends on the type of data, it will have a different interpretation. Then you could be placing dimensions in your model. For instance, if you want to dimension the angular dimension, you know, you'd have to have your point A and point B, and then you know you'll say how much is the offset, and it'll put the dimension pretty much constructed from those. I'll do an example here. If I wanted to choose my first 2 points, I could just do index. So we actually want to just get that list item at the index, list item. And we'll just, it's going to say 0. And all we need to do is actually come in here, click 1 and 1 plus 1. Or actually, we just want 2 items. And we just click that. And you immediately see like a little dimension string here. And your text, we can either find a way to make that what we need. And our size right now is probably pretty small. We probably want to come and make that maybe 5. And we get a couple more options for what we're going to do with that function. So we're offsetting it. It's 1. And then we're seeing like the dimension right here. And it's still pretty tiny. So, you know, this is something where you'd be working on, you know, are you getting the right size? And if, of course, there's any problematic thing, you could always just come back and actually just recreate your function all over again. That actually is not too problematic. And it's good to see that, because it's something you'll have to do at some point. So you're gonna delete text, or you know, you change something, just go ahead and delete the little component and put it back in there. You plug and play and it's right. And so you do the same thing if you're trying to make different types of dimensions or tags. The display command just lets you work on those, and the color command gives you the ability, of course, to make things in color, and it exports color information. So this is another way of looking at complex sets of information within your Grasshopper models. Have you ever wondered how you would actually get your Grasshopper code into actual renders? I'm going to show you that today. So we're looking at the class where I took these basic sort of offset splines, and I used a render preview function in Grasshopper so that they will look like this, where you see these are rendered. And I've even done an animation where I selected all these materials and it was rendered in Grasshopper. So let's go. Okay, so where I start is with a simple curve and a line. And I'll just go ahead and write the point of this code. This is for preview rotated, render rotated curve panels. That's just what I'll call it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the curve, and I'm actually going to create a line, and that line is actually going to be sort of a constructed line. It's not actually really the geometry, but I'm going to take the curve from the information from the model, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break down the curve into the control points. Already I see that there are 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break my my list pretty much into a list of each of the points. And so each one of these is going to be, this is 0, this will be 1, this will be 2, this will be 3, and this will be 4, but that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'll be 5, and unfortunately, see this one? Okay, this one is fine, okay. So you just see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to add 2 values, and it's really going to be where I'm going to construct a point, and I'm going to construct it, or maybe this will be easier. Construct a point, and it's really going to have a z coordinate that I'm going to really be using a number slider. And we're going to pretty much go from 0 to 10. Should be a good scale. And that's going to be in the z direction. Essentially, we're going to make one curve going up, one curve going down. There's going to be some minus for one set. There's going to be a plus for the other set. And so I'll go ahead and just plug in this point. And essentially that's how vector geometry works. Just add the vector to the point and it'll go in that direction, extend it, and you'll see what I'm talking about when it goes in. And so, of course, when we look at this itself, it's not too much showing it because it's sort of close. You see it now, and that's going to be how much it's going to be offset. So let me go ahead and just plug these in, and I'm plugging just the middle ones. I'm using Shift as I'm connecting multiple of these lines in. That's how you multi-select, and also if you press Alt, you can spread out the canvas a little bit. We're actually going to save this, just render preview panels 1. And so now I have 2 sets because I want to make these all curves. All I need to do is now construct a curve. And I could say it's a Nurbs curve. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and it's already gonna parse it properly. Vertex, Shift, and we're not gonna use the original, obviously. We're gonna use the new ones, and they're already gonna be in order. And then I'm gonna use the end and do the same thing twice. And what I'll do is I'll make sure to disconnect all. Then I'll connect the top, connect these, which are subtracted, and then I'll connect the bottom. So now we see this set of vector panels. And so the next thing I want to do is, of course, with this geometry, to loft these top and bottom curves. Select the top, press Shift with the bottom. There we go with that. And then I want to make a pipe. Very thin pipe, maybe 0.1 in this model. And I'm going to use pretty much the 2 curve panels on the sides. And I'm going to make sure to press Shift so that they both go through. I might actually go a little taller, maybe 0.3. And we're going to go ahead and do that next element of rotating around an axis. So this part is a little more tricky. Essentially, I'm going to take this geometry and rotate it. And I was being very simple. I wanted to rotate it at a bit of a range, like 45, 90, 135. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to use the function of range. And this pretty much says how many things are going to be in my range. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to construct a domain. And when you construct a domain, you just pretty much have a 0 or wherever it's going to. And I could easily just go 2 pi, 2 times pi. And so that will be my 360 because radians is the way that the angles are typically read. And so I just put my steps. So I break that down. and this will have all these angles. And all I need to do is both rotate that loft, but I don't yet have the axis. So that's the one last thing. Like, you know, remember we made that line over here? So all we need to do is carry it on over here. And now we can put in that geometry. And we can add the pipe using Shift. And it's a little bit fat. What if I want to make it a little thinner? Remember I made this as a number slider. And there we go. So that's just making that beautiful set of geometry. But now we want to go ahead and make a render preview of it. I'm going to go ahead for everything and just turn off the preview. Make sure to you right click over the blank space. Turn that preview off. And now we want to actually go into our display panel. And so from the display panel, we'll make two elements, two materials, and we're going to do one custom preview. And so what we're going to do is these pipes we really want to be having as one material, and it's going to be harder, or pretty solid, and we're going to have the panel to be transparent. So that would mean we have to rotate separately. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just duplicate this, disconnect. So I guess I'm going to disconnect the pipe or the loft from the bottom, and I'm going to disconnect the pipe from the top. Right. So when we create this geometry, that's going to go in here, and it really is going to be two custom previews, or actually it's going to be two custom previews because it's different material. Even both materials are going to be plugged in separately. And while I could just click on these values for white material as like diffuse, specular, emission, transparency, or shine, you know, you select it. There's one type for color, specular, you know, gives you that option for that color, gives you the option if it's going to emit. Transparency is just really a number, and similar for shine. But I know that my panel will be transparent. I'm just gonna set it in here. But as I want to, for sure, and I just want to check that it's there, I want to see the color. So, and I'm just going to set the diffuse. I need to just go to my params and to my color picker. That might be the easiest way for a lot of people. And I just plug that in, and that also would go for going into the specular, or if you're going into emission, those are all able to be plugged in with the color. So what I need to do is just plug that geometry in here, and all I need to do is go into rendered mode. And so now what we want to do is, as we're plugging this in, make sure when you're putting in transparency, it's actually 0 to 1. So I put in 0.5, so it's 50%. I'm going to turn off my preview for this item. So now I just see the rendered appearance. And so you can see, of course, it's the rendered as you change the color. Now I'm going to do the same thing for my pipe. My pipe geometry is this sort of the general right now. So what I need to do is just come into here and plug in the diffuse. I can just choose a color. And now, as you can see, we're in rendered mode. So you see like a beautiful set of rendered geometry. And if you just click on render, that geometry will be rendered. And it'll just be rendered just like the typical Rhino geometry. So it's a really beautiful way to get your result. So you can just do a simple animation. I'll just show you a basic of how to do this. But it will render the geometry that's not even really produced. So it's sort of fun there. And what I'm doing is I'm going to close the Rhino render window, and I'm just going to go to here. And the great thing about it, of course, is also, you know, if I change the slider or anything, you know, it might be slow sometimes, but it will be going. And one way that people can, of course, just hack this to get it exported is, of course, to just do a screen capture if you want to just play around with values. But you also have the ability, of course, to set a trigger for animating it. I'm not going to do that right now, but I will show you how to animate in general with Rhino. So you click on Render Tools, and you see in here there's an option for different types of animations. You can set up a sun study, you can fly through animation, a path animation, or 360. So I just did a 360 one. And in the options here, I have the options for how many frames, which direction, and pretty much it's going to go on the center of this window. And it tells you which viewport and the capture method and render preview, which hits right into the one that's there. You could also do full render, but that's going to definitely take longer, so be mindful of that. And pretty much I just, I want to do it really quickly, I just set it to 25. And all I do is either click this little arrow so I can play or start, or just click that. And you see it's gone really quickly. And I'm actually going to center it, and let's see. And what I'm going to do now is do sort of again. And you sort of see it sort of changed based on where I was located. So if you want to change where it's going to rotate from, you do it from there. And so, and what you want to do if you're going to render it is you click here, and this will actually go to the render dialog, and it'll go by the render folder that you currently have set up, or it'll create one. Just be mindful of that. That should be in your options. And this is how you do a render from Grasshopper. It's a great little skill. It's something you can plug in so you can visualize and share your models in rendered mode. Thanks again for joining me in this introduction to Grasshopper. We went over a lot of commands in Grasshopper. It's such a big program, but you can see the link in the description for other links for great Grasshopper tutorials from this channel. If you need help with your Rhino, improving Rhino, then go ahead and look at my course page for more classes in Rhino, so you can be developing both of these at the same time, because it is pretty necessary. It's been great being your instructor. I wish you the best in your modeling. I'll see you in the next class.